Hello, my name is Tom Burby, and I'm the author of The Last Boy on Earth, a book I wrote about 9 years ago, and I'm now going to read it for some friends of mine, and hopefully other people I haven't met who will be. Chapter 1, Awakenings. From the Journal of Brady Smith. You see, there was this boy, and he ruled the world. Everything belonged to him now. As far as his eyes could see, he was the only one left alive. Now, you might think he was pretty upset about the whole situation. For a while, he was. There were dead bodies and nothing but desolation, and it's true that he sat around a lot and wished that he was dead too. For a long time, he wondered why he remained and all the others were taken. And then he thought, it doesn't matter why. It just is, and anyway, sitting around just got boring. So he equipped himself with tools and weapons and set out with his faithful sidekick to see what there was left to see and do what there was left to do. He wasn't disappointed, because since the fall of humanity, the world had changed in 1,000 different ways too small to notice at first, and some so fantastic he couldn't believe it. As the days passed into weeks, he discovered something amazing. There really are monsters in the dark. I am that kid. My name is Brady Smith, and I'm the last boy on Earth. I used to live on Holyoke Street in Brewer, but I moved out a few weeks ago. I had to. There were too many ghosts. I'm 14, and I lived with my mom in our apartment until the abandonment. I don't know if she's dead or alive. My dad died 2 years ago in a hunting accident, and I have no brothers or sisters. And since my parents were only children, I have no cousins either. I had a lot of friends, but they're all gone. Sometimes I think I hear them when the whisperers speak to me, but I know that must be my imagination. I'm alone in the world. And it's been 5 weeks since I awoke to the empty silence. No, that's not quite right, because it isn't totally empty. The birds are everywhere, and I see a lot of wild animals in the city, deer, raccoons, even a few bears. Everything is growing. The lawns that no one ever mows are all officially wild. Grass is growing in cracks in the streets and sidewalks, and the trees are all leafed out. There are more insects than I can remember. Everything seems bursting with life. Were-dogs howl in the night. It's like the world hasn't even noticed that most of us are gone. I don't know if anyone will ever read this, but if I don't write it, I know I'll go crazy. Since I can't talk to anyone else, I figure that I can talk to myself through this journal. So much has happened, and there's no one else to talk to anyway, except my dog Max. I knew that once I started talking out loud to myself, I was in trouble. There's not much to do after the sun goes down. I can usually see the flame of the north roaring against the complete blackness that night has now become. I can usually hear the howl of the were-dogs in the forest, the darkest part of the abandonment. If I let my imagination do what it wants, all kinds of things start looking into my windows and whispering into my ears. If anyone should ever find this journal, and I really do hope someone someday does, I want you to know this. I didn't just sit around and wait to die. I made forward motion every day. Even if everyone else is gone, I'm moving on. Right now, it's 8 o'clock at night, and my only companion is my dog Max. The sun is just at the edge of the horizon, setting behind the hills over Bangor, and soon the world will go dark. So dark that I can see every star in the night sky. As far as I can tell, I'm now living in the great second dark age, because when the sun finally does go down, my little light will be the only proof of human life on Earth. I am a member of an endangered species, one soon to be extinct, if I am truly the last. I will be a little speck of light in the middle of a vast cemetery. I haven't heard a real human voice in a long time, except for the whisperers. I listen to music a lot, and it helps because these are friendly voices, voices from the past. Right now, I'm listening to the Beatles. The song is Nowhere Man. That just about says it all. In a few minutes, I'll turn off the music and the lantern and try to sleep. Usually this is pretty weird because I know I'm alone and everything, but sometimes I can't help but feel that I'm being watched. And then I wonder, who's watching? And that makes it hard to sleep. Some nights the whisperers visit me, and I'll be damned if I can sleep at all. They won't leave me alone with their constant voices in my ears. I wish I could tell them to shut up, but even though I can almost understand them, I don't think they can hear me. It wasn't yet morning, and a silence had fallen over the world, a silence that once ruled it but hadn't prevailed against the constant grind of human machinations for centuries. Sunrise was near, so close you could hear it just over the horizon, crawling up the side of the planet. In the moist dewfall, a single bird began to sing its song, summoning the sun back into the world. The earth turned, and Brady opened his eyes. As he lay there, no urgency to get out of bed spurred him onward like when he had been a student in school. In those days, the alarm meant that he could throw himself out of bed, take his shower, quickly shove food down his throat, and be off by 7:30. Now he could lie in bed all day if he wanted, and no one would say a thing. No one would notice, and no one would care. There was no particular place to go, and no one to mark his tardiness. As he lay there in the half-real world of morning, he thought back to the beginning of things, or the end of things, to the first day of the abandonment. He could see it in his mind's eye like a movie, and he was the protagonist, lying in bed in his mother's apartment. He was a boy sick with fever, at a time when such a thing foreshadowed only one thing. The rumors were all over the internet, television, and the neighborhood. A new strain of the flu was killing people all over the world, and it began with a fever. He'd been ill for days, and the sore throat led to the fever, the body aches, vomiting, and a sincere wish to do nothing but lie down and sleep. On that particular morning, Brady opened his eyes from the long sleep only to find the room in complete and utter darkness. As he remembered it, he pictured himself wet with sweat, shivering and uncomfortable. He searched for the familiar LED of his clock radio to tell him the time, but there was nothing but darkness in the thick and enveloping gloom, and he was too tired to wonder. Instead, he rolled the covers off his body and closed his eyes again. If the power had gone out, at least he was feeling a little better. Besides, there wasn't any school, not anymore. Schools all over America, all over the world, had closed to help stem the growth of the pandemic. As he lingered for the millisecond between sleep and waking, his mind wandered. Mom, fever, school closed, no medicine, bad news, worry, night sweats, sleeping, deep slumber. He remembered his mother mopping his head with a washcloth, and he could see through the fever haze that she was worried. No, it was more than that. She was frightened to a near panic. Words meshed together in a frenzy. What had she said to him? Must go to find help, be right back, stay right here, so hot, burning up. And then there was an image of her looking down on him with those big brown eyes, that wrinkled brow, and a hand upon his forehead. Hospital might let me in, pharmacy's closed, no a way in, must find something to help. And then there was darkness and quiet, sleep. In the swirling maelstrom that was his mind, he became aware that his mother had left him alone in the apartment in a desperate attempt to find something that might help him fight off this sickness, even though she knew there was no cure or a vaccine for this new strain of influenza. What could she be thinking? The world had stopped for most people. The pandemic was running rampant throughout the continent of Asia and the Near East. So far, the northern United States and Canada had remained relatively clear of the contagion, but the news had been warning people for weeks to stay inside as much as possible and be prepared for a long period of waiting for the clear signal from the World Health Organization and the Centers for Disease Control. They didn't really know how many had perished. No agency ever seemed to mention numbers or casualty rates, and each day brought more dire news as the world went into lockdown. No one went anywhere. People stayed home unless their work was necessary to the functioning of the federal and state authorities in charge of the effort to isolate and manage the contagion. Schools closed, public gatherings were expressly forbidden. The world was waiting for some kind of all-clear signal. And then a small group of cases were reported in Canada, probably brought there by migratory birds as the weather warmed, but it was unclear what actually caused the illness in the first place. Probably Brady would never know. Birds might be the carriers, or mosquitoes, or the wind. How were so many people coming down with it if they stayed inside and didn't mix? It had all happened so quickly that the united efforts of all the health officials in the world were stymied in their efforts to discover the cause. In the long wait before he fell ill, he played video games, listened to music, and watched television while his mother worked as a nurse at the medical center. "Brady," his mom would say before she went to work, "stay in the house, please. In here you're safe. I know you're bored, but it's better to be bored than, well, you know. If you stay in here, you'll be okay." "I'll be okay," he said, trying to alleviate her fear. "I'll surf the web, watch TV, text my friends. Really, I'm fine." But since the world effectively had shut down, the web was so slow as to be pointless. The cable was sketchy, going on and off randomly. And besides, most channels were 24/7 news now that the world looked like it was ending. "I know you will," she said. "I don't know what I'd do if—" But then she couldn't finish her sentence. "Well, what about you?" he would ask. "You work at the hospital. Aren't you in danger?" She would smile a little, which Brady knew was for his edification. It didn't work. And then she would say something assuring like, "We take so many precautions. We keep everything clean and sterile. I shower before I come home every night. We wear masks and have clean rooms. We have protocols to keep the pandemic from spreading." But the problem wasn't the hospitals. Everyone seemed to get the illness. All ages, people who stayed inside, people who went outside, people who wore masks, even people who didn't. It didn't seem to matter. He kept a strong interest in the development of the disease, checking the World Health Organization's website every day for news releases. The idea that there might be something out there, uncontrollable, unavoidable, silent and lethal, that could devastate entire populations of humans seemed as unlikely to Brady as zombies rising from the grave, or a horde of orcs pillaging his village. Even a boy with a stalwart imagination like Brady had a difficult time imagining the effects of a severe worldwide pandemic. He spent many hours alone while his mom worked, and his mind wandered to his small personal library, to his Norse mythology books, his favorites, in which even the gods faced an end at a time called Ragnarok. Those tall Northmen imagined an end to everything, even their gods. Thor and Odin, Freya and Balder, all fell in the end. So why not lowly humans? Thor could tackle the Midgard serpent, and Fenris would rise, and those were enemies worthy of gods. But the people only had a little tiny virus, still largely unknown and invisible. He never knew precisely why or how he had become sick, but his mother thought it might have been her fault. She might have brought it in on her shoes, she said. She might have brought it home on her clothing. But however it arrived, she blamed herself. First, Brady got very tired, and then the fever hit, and his mother had seen it before. The illness came on quickly and killed within a few days, and he knew this when he took to his bed and stayed there. She called in sick so she could take care of him, spending hours of attention and nervous hovering, holding his hand. He couldn't seem to stay conscious. The few glimpses of his mother that he could remember were of a troubled woman, eyes red and tearful, lips pursed in a tense smile, her hand applying wet cloths to his forehead. From the Journal of Brady Smith. There was this pandemic thing going around, and Mom thought maybe I had it. I knew she was worried. There'd been a lot of reports of people catching it. That's all that was on the TV or the internet. I felt like crap. My mom made me go to bed and kept cooling me off with ice packs and wet towels and lots of painkiller. She kept muttering, and I can't remember what she said except that it sounded something like, "What good are doctors if you can't get one? And what's going to happen to him?" And then she did something I hardly ever heard her do. She prayed. To be honest, I thought she was going a little crazy. I don't know how, but I knew I wasn't going to die. When you're really, really sick, but you aren't going to die, you kind of know it. I knew it, and I kept saying, "Mom, fine. I just have this infection. The leukocytes will save me." But it didn't seem to stop her worrying, and she was all over me, kissing me and cooling me off, and I kept throwing up, and so she was really worried. I know enough about survival to know that you can go a lot longer without food than you can without water, so I really made an effort to drink. I could keep down sugar water, flat ginger ale, even suck on a popsicle, but that's about it. I just wanted to sleep. More than anything, I just wanted to close my eyes. And then the world went black again. A peaceful exit to the river of dreams. The fever should have killed him, but it didn't. His mother left for the hospital and whatever desperate cure she could find, and she never returned. He wouldn't find that out for a while. He had survived somehow. When he awoke that morning, the first morning of the new world, the sunlight filtered through the louvers into the room, his bed, and his face. Outside, he could hear the song of a single bird. For a long time he listened to it, and it seemed to fill his mind. How strange, he thought, that the whole world was out those windows, but all he could hear was a single bird's song. He looked for the clock radio's telltale time, but its face was black. He fumbled for his watch and saw the time, 5:30 in the morning. He was going to put the watch back onto the side table when he pulled it quickly back to his view. It wasn't the time that concerned him, it was the date. The last time he remembered seeing it was June 3rd. It was now June 7th. He had lost 4 days. "Mom!" he yelled at the very top of his lungs. More a cry of panic than a summons, he called her again. She didn't respond. "Mom!" he demanded to the silent room, the empty house, the noiseless neighborhood. With no answer, he went to throw himself out of bed, but found himself unsure of his own legs. Weak and faltering, he had to steady himself by sitting on the edge of the bed for a moment. And that was when Max sauntered into the room, oblivious to the intense fright of his master's mind. "Max," he said as the dog rubbed up against his leg. The mongrel looked at him with plaintive, hungry eyes. Hungry meant he hadn't been fed. Hungry meant that Mom hadn't fed him, and Mom always took care of Max. Where was she? He found the strength to make it to the kitchen, where he could tell immediately that something was wrong, and that in very small ways the world had changed. He looked for his mother, since calling for her seemed to do no good. Glancing out the kitchen window to the driveway below, he saw that her car was gone. Brady found his backpack and pulled out his cell phone, hoping that there was still some power in it. He dialed his mother's number and waited for what seemed an eternity, and then his heart fluttered when someone picked up the line on the other end. Mom, is that you? What's happened? The power's out." But he was interrupted by the recorded message of the cell phone provider saying, "Message B12. Welcome to One Cell. The party you're trying to reach is not available. Our network is currently experiencing technical difficulties. Please try again later. We apologize for any inconvenience." The message began repeating itself, and Brady hung up the phone. Mom was gone. He had lost 4 days. The power and the phones were out. Still, what else was there? And for all of his panic, Brady did something remarkable. He forced himself to think, to observe, and to calculate. Observation mode, a state of mind devoid of emotion to be used while gathering data. Observe and report to the brain, and that is all. Use in cases where it is essential to maintain self-control. You are a recorder. You are not thinking, you are watching. When he was in the 5th grade, he had consumed all the stories in The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. From the detective, Brady learned that in a time of uncertainty, one could piece together the clues or inferences and come to some type of conclusion. Sherlock Holmes said, "Once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth." And Brady slowly began to realize that with a little concentration, he could shut down his emotions for a short while and simply be in the moment. It was strange at first. He stared out of the windows towards Wilson Street for a very long time, analyzing the world, sorting out what he could eliminate. There were no cars rolling down the road. There were no people walking on the sidewalk. There were no airplane contrails in the sky. He opened the window to listen. There was a quiet that covered everything, a silence in the midst of a world that was once buzzing with the sounds of movement and life. Here and there he could hear the barking of dogs in the distance, all muffled. No sound of civilization, no honking of horns, no sounds of jets landing or taking off from Bangor International Airport, no loud thumps and bangs from the 18-wheelers with their loads of wood chips and pulp logs as they hit the pothole by the Irving. One thought stabbed at his mind like a knife. It poked at him, and he kept fending it off, but he knew in some small, strong place within him that he was right, even though he had not yet proven it. It was the day after Ragnarok. The gods had fallen. There were no people. End of chapter.